Well, many of you have probably been following along on my Xterra, the 2002 that I bought for $400, and I had to replace both heads on this, and it turned out fairly well.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Now I've got everything all back together, and the only issue I have right now are my exhaust. The manifold on the passenger side is actually pretty bad. It's been damaged. It's got a big crack in it, and when I put it back together on the vehicle, I just did it temporarily so I can actually start it up and to verify that the engine was going to run okay. Now the manifold on the driver's side is okay, although it did have a slight hairline crack in the manifold. Overall, it is in pretty good shape, but I will keep an eye on it later, and if I have to, I will have to buy another manifold eventually down the road. Now, the only remedy from the passenger side to replace this manifold was to actually go online and order a new one. I actually ordered a brand new one for less than $40. These are very common on the 3.3 Xterras. If you go online or if you even listen to a lot of these vehicles running around, you will hear that they actually have a manifold leak coming from the passenger side. Very common. It is a manifold deflaw that they design into the manifold, which they do break after about 100,000 miles. Now here is the brand new manifold that I picked up, and I will show you online on eBay where I bought it. And it took about a week to get it. It has not even been opened yet, so it'll be nice. And this does come with a heat shield that you will probably have to take off on your old one. More than likely, you'll probably have to just rip it off the best way you can, because we all know what happens. This manifold actually comes with the gaskets, which is really nice. And also here is the manifold itself. Like I said, these sell like hotcakes online. This one here is about $40 free shipping. And you can see what it looks like. Go ahead and open it up for you real quick. And there is a nice look at it. And this here is for the passenger side. The driver's side and the passenger side are not interchangeable, so they are completely different. Now on mine, when I took mine off, I actually had to get these two bolts off here the best way I can. I did manage to get this bolt off here and this one here, but the back one was completely rounded off. So basically what I did, I popped this off, just broke it off the old manifold. And I may not even use this new one here, a heat shield on this manifold. It depends on how it goes, but nevertheless, this is what we're going to be changing. And since this looks really nice, I may actually go ahead and do the passenger side a little bit later, because this Xterra has turned out to be a really nice vehicle for no more than I've got into it. And of course, here is the manifold gaskets. So now to get these bolts off, you'll probably have to use a little bit of heat. If you go back to my very first video in the series of doing this Xterra, I do believe I show you how to get these bolts off. They're pretty easy to get off on these Xterras. Now, before we start into the video too deep, I wanted to just kind of remind you some of the things you will have to have. Most of these bolts on the manifolds on these Xterra are stud bolts like this. Now, most of the time when you're trying to get these bolts off, sometimes the nuts will come off, leave the studs behind. Sometimes the studs will come out together with the bolt and nut all together, which is great if you can. That'll happen. But in some cases, you will have to have the stud still stuck behind into the head. So what you'll have to do is get a Torx bit. This is a female. This is an E10, and these actually go on like that. And these are designed to grip these stud bolts. And I had really good luck. I've got every one of mine out when I was pulling this head out. So mine should not be too bad to take off. So just be aware of that, and also have a decent pair of gloves, because there are some sharp edges on these manifolds that can cut you. And other than that, we're ready to go ahead and start taking this apart. Now, one of the first things I will probably end up doing, and you don't have to do this, but I do like my room. I'm going to get this battery out of the way. Probably end up unhooking the power steering hose here. Get this line here out of the way. Probably pull it back. Disconnect a few wires and hoses here and just kind of pull it out of the way, because down here is our manifold. And once you get a lot of these hoses and lines out of the way, you can actually work a little bit better and get this manifold off. But like I said earlier in one of my other videos, there's always a trick to everything. Once you fiddle around, you can always find better ways to do things. But so what we're going to do now is go ahead and start moving some of the stuff out of the way so we can have better access down into our manifold. Alright, so what I've done so far, taking the battery out, my power steering reservoir, it just slides up out of this bracket right there. So if you slide it up, pull it back, you can move it out of the way. And I had a ground right here that was kind of snaking through here. I unhooked that, pulled it back out of the way, and I took a bungee cord with my power steering line here and kind of pulled it back out of the way. and I disconnected my O2 sensor. Probably didn't have to, but when I unloosened those 3 bolts right there on that manifold, that catalytic converter will fall down just a little bit, so I just didn't want any pressure on my wire. And let's see, that was about it. And I was going to go ahead and hook these fuel lines, but I think I can work around that. Now what we got to do next is go ahead and get these 3 bolts out right there. There's one there, well actually a stud, but my nuts will come off of those studs. There's 2 there and one underneath, and I'll be using a 14mm socket. Now if you put a little bit of heat on it with a propane torch or something, usually they'll break loose pretty good. I've had pretty good luck with these, which is kind of amazing. So we'll go ahead and get these loose, and once we get these loosened up, we can kind of let this back of this catalytic converter kind of fall backwards, and it may actually fall down far enough where we can actually get these 2 bolts right here on this one. Now, to be fair, I did not put these 2 in. So in order for you to get those out, I think the best thing to do is go ahead and drop that catalytic converter off of there, so those 3 bolts like I said. And I think you should be able to get your socket and extension up there and go ahead and crack these guys here loose on that. And if you're lucky, they'll probably come out as one unit, and it just makes it a little bit easier to work with. So that's what we're going to do next. And go ahead and see if we can get this out of here. Alright, so we're on our last one, the top one there, so you can kind of see it. And there'll be a little bit of pressure on this because this whole thing here is loose and it's trying to drop down, so get this off. Alright, so alright, so there we go. I just about got it there. And there is that. So there are the 3 nuts that we took off. Now, like I said earlier, if you have a heat shield that looks like this, you're probably going to have to pry it off. This is the one I had to take off on that side earlier, and you can see that bolt was rusted off. Couldn't get it off. And also the other one here. So basically just kind of lift these up if you can, and get your socket and be able to get onto these nuts here. And this is how I basically got mine off. You may have to do the same thing, because we all know these shields are never in very good shape to begin with when you start working on your vehicle. And now you can see I can take something like this and kind of just push, separate that, and that'll give me a little more room there to get some of these other bolts off. Or maybe just use a big screwdriver like this, and you can kind of push this back out of the way a little bit. And this will give you enough room to go ahead and start taking these bolts loose and pulling this manifold out of there. Okay, so at this point I've gotten all my bolts out except for one, and the one here I tucked the E10 socket to it and pulled the stud out. Like I said, I've already had some of these out, but even when I pulled them off for the first time, they really weren't that bad to get off. And I think you can see the manifold moving now. It's about ready to fall off. I'm going to just let it drop off together with the catalytic converter. All one piece here. Alright, so there's that. Get the socket out of here and a bolt and nut. Alright, so there's that one. And I don't think there's any more in there. We'll find out. Separate it here. Let's see. Alright, I think you can kind of see what's going on here. So right up here on the corner of this manifold, you got to watch. It kind of gets hung up on the back of this alternator bracket. There's a bolt that goes through there with a big nut on it. Sometimes it'll catch that, so you might have to take your... There you go. Alright, we got that loose now. We got one stud I can see right down there. I'm probably going to have to get that out somehow, so let me figure this out real quick. And the stud I'm talking about, if I zoom in, see it right there? That one right back here in the back, so I may have to push that manifold back on, get my E10 socket on there, and once I get that out, I should be able to get this manifold out. Okay, so what I had to do here is, well, one thing, first of all, my part of my manifold just broke in two because it's in pretty bad shape, and here is one piece of it. Maybe you'll get lucky and this will happen to you. There's that piece, and the other piece is ready to come off. What I did, I just took a pry bar, the catalytic converter, down as far as I could and back, and it got enough room here for me to slide this off, it looks like. So it looks like we're ready to pull this up out of here. Wiggle it a little bit, there we go, okay. There is that, and you can see just how bad a shape it is. Cracks everywhere. So if you get it back, if you get this catalytic converter back far enough like this out of the way, this will give you enough room to slide this manifold out, and you can see the bolts here go through here. And this is, if this was any thicker, it'd be a problem, but this is just thin enough here to get enough room to slide this out over the catalytic converter. So glad that worked out. Alright, so we'll go ahead and take our stud out. Now, sometimes if your ratchet, your 1/4 inch is too big, it's hitting this here. Sometimes you can get a small little ratchet like this, a little 1/8 inch drive, and it works pretty good. It gives you a lot more room to work with because the bigger ratchets sometimes take up a little space. So we got that out, and that wasn't too bad. Okay, so got all the power steering bolts out. Basically, it's two 12 millimeters bolts and a 14 with this guy on the back. Go back to my second video and you'll see all about this power steering. It's not that big of a deal. Basically, you stick your little socket into the power steering holes here on the pulley, and you get into the bolts on the front side here. I didn't even have to take any of my hoses or anything off, and I am using a little short extension like this and a ratchet. And you can see where the power steering unit is. You just push it down out of the way, and there's that bracket. Now I can get to those 4 bolts. What I decided to do, and I think this might be easier for you, is to go ahead and just take out that power steering bracket. It's right here off the side. On the front, you got 3 bolts. You got one there, and one there. Take this bolt out, and this will let you flex this hose down, because you got one bolt that is right there where my finger is. I think I can zoom in a little bit. You take that out, the power steering bracket will come right out, and it is right there. Right there. I think you can kind of see the hole there. Once you get that out, then let's lift that bracket up out of there, because you really need a lot of room. And by the way, here are all the bolts. They're pretty simple bolts, 12 and 14 millimeter bolts. Yeah, it's gotten to this point where I did not think I'd have to take that out, but there's just no room to get that manifold in there. Now I have lots of room to slide that manifold in there and go ahead and put my stud bolts in there. So I think this is probably the best option for you. I know this seems like a lot of work, but if you just do it a little bit at a time, it's really not that big of a deal. You may have to go ahead and just yank your power steering, but this is basically how I found it's probably best to do at this point. I did kind of move stuff back and forth here a little bit, and I got a bungee cord here holding this back. So this is why I have a lot more room here. So you might want to take 5 minutes and just kind of push things out of the way. It does really make the job a lot easier, and you won't get as frustrated. Alright, so just a quick side note here before we start putting everything back together. Do yourself a favor and you'll thank me later. Take all your stud bolts, put oil on them, and go ahead and thread them in by your hand and tighten them down, bring them back out. Make sure that they go in straight, because there's nothing like getting these on. Get your manifold on, and you're on your last one. You find out it's cross-threaded because you didn't know about it. Check them all now, because this will save you a lot of time. This is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to oil these up and kind of screw them in here like this. Make sure all the threads in the block and then the heads are okay. You can see I can screw that one in just fine. And even take the ones. Some of these you probably couldn't get the nuts off. Don't worry about it. Just screw it in the way it is. You know, just make sure your thread's going to be okay, like that. And just double check everything, because like I said, I've cross-threaded things before on the last bolt, realizing I should have checked this first. So let's go ahead and get this on. Alright, so we're kind of prepped here. We got our stud bolt in, and they're the shorter ones, and that's all we're going to put in for now. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to take this manifold and we're going to slide it on these 3 bolts here loosely. Then once we get this on here, we're going to pull back on this a little bit, and we should be able to get those 3 bolts to slide in on the bottom here. And once those slide in, then we can just take our longer ones and go ahead and put those in by hand, start them in. And don't forget, before you do any of this, go ahead and put your gasket on there, and go ahead and set your gasket up on those stud bolts there, because you don't want to forget that. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, as you can see, I got the gasket on there. I got my other gasket kind of sitting up there. What I'm going to have to do is take one hand and kind of hold that gasket. Then I'll slide this manifold down on there, and there's no way I'm going to be able to hold the camera here at the same time. And when we get it on, it's going to be tight, but if you pull this back just enough, we should be able to slide this back far enough and slide that manifold right over those stud bolts down there. And that'll make me really happy. So let me see what we can do here real quick. Alright, you can see we got that on. You can see how that kind of slid on right there. Now I'm going to take my other hand, and we're going to push this manifold on. You can see the bolts are pretty daggone close, and make sure your manifold gasket doesn't get torn and it's still on there. And now we'll go ahead and push this manifold on. Okay, I'll take a chance here. Maybe this will work, and maybe the camera will be okay there, so maybe you can kind of watch me do this. So I'll take the other hand, make sure the gasket's straight, and now we'll go ahead and push this down a little bit. And we're just about on. Right there. A bit more. Just about got it. Alright, actually it's probably too far back. There we go. So close. There we go. Okay. And there it's on. You can see how I kind of pushed up on it. Okay, and as you can see, it is pretty much on now. There's 2 things that you could probably do. What I did with my power steering and pulling off this bracket was probably a little overkill, but it did give me a lot of room here to get my hand in here and to slide this in the way I wanted. Now, the other thing you can do, you can get underneath the vehicle. There are 2 bolts on the pipe. You can disconnect those and pull that catalytic converter down a little bit, probably 4 or 5 inches perhaps, away from this manifold. And this will allow you to get into one critical bolt, which is going to be right about here on this manifold. It's really hard to get up under there. I can almost get my hand up under here like this and get it, but with this manifold up against this right now, I'm going to have to push this back a little bit before I bolt this together, and I think I might just have just enough room to get my hand up under there and put a bolt on here and a nut. This is the only stud that's difficult to get the nut on. This one back here is really easy. Matter of fact, you can probably almost kind of see it right about there. It's not all that bad to get to. If you can look right about down there, I think you can kind of see it. So just remind yourself, if you have a bigger garage, I'm kind of in a tight area, I probably would have just pulled this exhaust off down from the bottom and dropped it back 3 or 4 inches. And there's a secondary O2 wire back down there. You got to kind of watch, don't let it get caught. And you can do it that way. So basically, there's a couple ways you can do it, but this is how I did it, and hopefully this will help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get this nut on the bottom of this here. Try to get my hand up under here and try to get that on there somehow. And the thing is that catalytic converter comes right up just like this, and there's not a lot of room between the catalytic converter and this bolt. So I'll figure out something here in a second. Alright, success. Now here is how I got that nut on that stud that I was talking about right here. I basically took a pry bar. Be careful, don't damage your gasket there. Kind of pulled it back about a ½ inch, an inch or so, and actually when I put my hand up under here like this, I'm able to start it on my fingers. It's a little tight, but it started. Now all I gotta do is put my ratchet on there and I go ahead and tighten it up. I'll have to use one of these guys here, obviously. And of course I'll have to use a ratchet like this, get this on there. And this is a 14 millimeter. I should be able to tighten it up and we'll be good. So I guess we'll go ahead and put this all back together now, and we'll be done here. So I'm kind of glad I got this done, and we'll do a first start here in a little bit after I get my power steering and bracket back on and all that. So I hope this helps you guys out. So So there we go. Hopefully this helps you guys out and makes your job just a little bit easier. But like I said, there's a couple options here. Although I think taking the 2 bolts back on the bottom here off. Let me see if I can get a light under here real quick and show you that. Alright, I'll just get down here like this real quick with a light, and I'll show you those 2 bolts on that pipe, which is right there. I think if you take those 2 off, just cut them off, and you can replace them. They're not very big. You can kind of pull this catalytic converter back down, give you a few inches, and that probably would help you out quite a bit. And that's, of course, if you wanted to do it that way. So let me go ahead and get this on here, and we'll start this thing up shortly. Okay, I got it on. I actually pushed this back as far as it would go. Almost, the studs are almost out of the manifold. Got my hand back here with one of these guys. Got the ratchet on the nut, and I took my other finger and stuck down here and kind of guided it, and I just kind of tightened it like this. Slowly, but it went on. It's good and tight. So we're all done. All I gotta do is finish the other bolts here and put it back together. And I didn't even tear the gasket. So hopefully this will help you out. Wow, it's done. I can't believe it. All right, she's all back together, and I decided to go ahead and put that pretty heat shield on there. I think you can kind of see it there. Those 3 bolts tried my patience. There's one right there, I think you can kind of see it, and the other 2 are like right there, kind of sticking out there. Little tiny bolts that hold that heat shield on, but I got them on. Took a mirror to guide them in, but so I can see, but that's all on, battery's on. Got my ground on down there. And didn't forget to hook up my power steering wire there. Is for your power steering. So guess we'll go ahead and start it up and see what we got. You remember how loud it was earlier, so let's go over here and hit the key and see what we got with my long arms. 3, 2, 1. Oh wow, what a difference. Very quiet. Oh yeah, I love it. No more noise on this side, that's for sure. It's quiet. Oh yes, I love it when a plan comes together. All right, so you can see down there, really quiet. I am really happy. The only thing I got left to do is this exhaust over here. I got a bolt I got to put in on the bottom. It's easy to get to, and my exhaust is quiet. It's done. So I hope this video helped you guys out a little bit. Well, I gotta tell you, for 212,000 miles, this engine sounds really good. I'm really impressed with it. So I am the 2nd owner, I believe, or the 3rd. They took good care of this car. No more moisture in my cap since we got the new head gaskets on. So now all I gotta do is get it outside and start cleaning it up, make it pretty, and start driving it. So we're gonna shut it off. All right, we'll shut her off. So I am really happy. I'm glad this is done. Just in time for the winter driving season. And you're going to get a little bit of smoking off of it because it's got that new paint and stuff on it. But other than that, we are done, guys. So if you like this video, say hi, let me know where you're watching from. And if you like it, give it a thumbs up. So until my next video, guys, hopefully this little video will help you out on your Xterra. Until then, I'll see you later.